Hello again. We're back to continue with our chart that we started, and this is a Bible study that actually covers the whole Bible over a period of several weeks. Not in great depth, but in enough to kind of get us familiar with and understanding some of the things that we need to do as the Bible teaches. And so this second page is titled Introduction to the Old Testament. Before we start into the Old Testament, which is the first of the two major divisions of the Bible, of course, the Old and the New Testament, we need to understand there are different time frames being depicted here or told about, and that uses that word time period. So God deals with people according to certain conditions. And as we look at the Old Testament, starting with the beginning of man and his placement into the Garden of Eden, we find there were certain conditions there that were unique compared to the others that are going to follow. We're going to look at four different ones. They're innocence, and then followed by conscience, followed by a time period that we'll refer to as the time of the patriarchs, and then finally the law and the prophets. And as you read the Old Testament, you're going to see that these four time periods are depicted, and as you place the stories and the events in their proper time period, you'll have a better understanding of how they pertain to you and to your life. So the first thing that we're looking at is a time period of innocence. Of all the people that have ever lived, only two people ever lived in that particular time period, sort of. And what I mean by that, you'll see. Adam and Eve, of course, were created without sin. They were placed in the garden and given certain commandments. One of the commands was to not eat of a particular tree. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So they were not supposed to eat that fruit. At that time, then, they were in a state of innocence. They had no sin. They had no guilt. They had no fear. And so now we find that there was a manner of dress in the garden under innocence. And actually wasn't a manner of dress, it was a manner of not being dressed. They were naked. There was no shame in their nakedness because they were innocent. Innocence is born in a certain sense, and I know we all have the tendency and the nature to sin, but innocence is our original state, even as it was this original state of man. And a child at the age of 1 year, when he's just or she's just barely able to walk, maybe they can kind of run around a little bit, but if they are in the house running around and they don't have any clothes on, they don't have any shame with that. They're okay with it because, like Adam and Eve, they are innocents. The need to cover ourselves is because we sense the guilt and the shame of our sinful natures and our sinful deeds. So innocence begins with Adam and Eve, and they also end that dispensation. I use the word dispensation, it's another word for time period. They ended it by disobeying God at that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When they ate that, they became aware of what was right and what was wrong. And there's a lot to dig into there, but we're not going to do that right now. But at that point, their minds told them this is right and this is wrong. And so now we enter into a time that we call the conscience. The conscience is that thing in us that does tell us what's right and what's wrong. And we gained that as a race, as the human race at the Garden of Eden with that first act of disobedience. And so as a child, they began to know, and they moved from that time period of innocence, and they realized they can't run around naked. and they begin to understand some things are right and some things are wrong intuitively. It's just within humanity that there are certain things that are right and some things that are wrong. But from that, God wants to progress the human race and do some works in it. So now he brings us to a time that we call the patriarchs, the time period of the patriarchs. The patriarchs, another word for patriarch, is fathers. And so now God brings in spiritual fathers to bring man, specifically a group of people that would later become known as Israel, to begin to fulfill his will. And that had to be shaped by these people that we're referring to as the fathers. Even in the New Testament, is often referred to by even Jesus and those that were with him. They were referred back to this time period, and they call it our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the initial patriarchs. And what do we need patriarchs for? We need people that are wiser, that are older, that are authority figures to help us in our lives and sometimes correct us, even punish us. And so fathers are parental figures, and God gave parental figures to mankind at this time of the patriarchs. And it started with a man by the name of Abraham, and it went all the way to the time of Moses. As you probably know, that we don't stay under the fathers in our natural family forever. We stay there for 18, 19, 20 years perhaps. But at that point, we kind of graduate into another realm, and I'll call that realm the realm of society. Well, society has to have its own set of rules and regulations to keep order. We've got to move beyond just the patriarchs or our fathers' teaching in our own home, or even at the most our own clan, larger family unit. But we move into this law and prophet period where we go by the governing laws of the land. And so God brings that part of the Old Testament into being at the time of Moses, when Moses went up into the mountain and received directly from the hand of God, or the finger of God, the 10 Commandments. And so now these people, again, who are going to be called Israel, are now under this time period called the Law and the Prophets. And so what we've done is just simply kind of illustrated these time periods that God is moving mankind through in a similar way that we are born in innocence as a person. We move into conscience as we begin to think and understand right and wrong. And then we move into the parental time where parents guide and direct and teach us, reprove us, whatever. And then finally, we move into society, which is governed by laws. And just a parallel there between those two things so that kind of understand what's happening here. The introduction to the Old Testament. So that's the introduction, the time of innocence, the time of conscience, the time of the patriarchs, and the time of the prophets. And you'll see all of these unfold as we go through the lessons. Thank you again.